while she had everything she wanted served on a golden platter by my father. At 20, Zoe concluded that I wasn't meant to be in the house anymore. Of course, my dad agreed.
You don't need him since you have me, Daddy. Cut him off and let him leave.
My father did whatever his princess wanted. He kicked me out of his house without anything, not even clothes, because he got them for me. A good Samaritan, who's become my best friend now, helped me that night. Hi there, I'm Owen, and I'm currently 25 years old. I work as a nurse, and I'm, well, an orphan. My mom died when I was only 19 years old, and life was very unfair to me for 2 whole years after her death. Although, before her death, it also was. My father was alive then, but he didn't like me, simply because I was a boy. He had this unhealthy obsession with female children, and only cared about my sister. Well, adopted sister. My father had been so sure and hopeful that I'd turn out to be a girl, but my mom wanted a boy. Because he was so sure that the universe was on his side and I'd be a girl, he suggested for them to not check my gender until I was born. They both agreed on it and remained in the dark about my gender. My dad bought so many female clothings while my mom got unisex. She wasn't hooked on me being a boy, even though she wanted me to. When I turned out to be a boy, my dad wasn't happy. He showed that he wasn't, expressing frustration that the universe hadn't been on his side. For years, my dad held grudges against me for something I had no hand in. He didn't like me anywhere close to him and would yell at me for the slightest mistake. As I grew older, he began to trouble my mom too. He still wanted a female child, and they'd been trying for one, but my mom didn't get pregnant. He blamed her for it. The first time I ever got to bond with my dad was once when his company hit the highest sales. He'd been so excited that he'd asked my mom and I to dress up. "We're going to have fun at the park." I was filled with happiness. My friends always talked about how they went for picnics and dates with their parents, but all I did was sit quietly and listen to them with envy. Finally, I would be able to give my own story. I couldn't stop smiling that day. I dressed quickly and went downstairs to meet him. I was 11 then. I sat beside him with a smile, and he turned to me, but looked away after. He didn't smile back, but his acknowledgement meant a lot to me. When my mom was done, we all left for the park. It was going smoothly, my parents walking hand in hand and me beside them. Well, until my father began comparing us to other families. "Wow, those people have 3 girls? How lucky can they be? Unlike our family. Owen, you'd have been better if you were a girl. Unfortunately, you're just a boy." My mom was quiet and ignored him. I also did the same. I mean, I couldn't say anything to him, but I pretended to not hear him and focused on the noise in the park. He continued until he suddenly stopped a family. "All your children are females? Wow, you're the luckiest. Well, you have a good-looking young man there." Him? I didn't want him. If I'd known that he'd be a boy, I wouldn't have let my wife have it.
Now you're gonna hold it right there. Why do you always look down on Owen? You brought him here to have fun, but all you've done is continuously remind him of how you hate that he came out as a boy. Why are you blaming the child as if you weren't the one who produced him?
I'd never seen my mother so angry. Her voice was high, so I was afraid that people might hear them. Most of all, I was scared of having any of my friends there. However, it seemed as though the universe was against me, because my parents were so loud about cussing themselves out that everyone around was staring at us. My world shattered when I saw my loudest friend approaching. "Wow, your dad really hates you, Owen. Why didn't you ever tell us?" I was too embarrassed to say anything. I would beg him to keep it a secret, but I knew he wouldn't. I was done for. My mom grabbed my hand and pulled me away. When we returned home, my dad was nowhere to be found. The next day, I arrived at school to meet the expected. The whole school was talking about how my dad hated me. I couldn't concentrate. When I got home, I locked myself in my room and cried so much. Anyway, time passed, my dad not changing, and my mom not having a female child. After my 19th birthday, my dad brought up adoption. He still badly wanted a daughter, so he thought he could adopt one, but my mom wasn't having it. She vehemently refused, standing in her words that I was enough for them. But my dad thought otherwise. One day, they had a very big fight that landed my mom in a hospital. She was hypertensive, and getting all worked up and agitated had caused her to pass out. Her death was so quick and unexpected. I saw my whole life get destroyed when the doctor announced at the hospital that they couldn't help her. It was a traumatizing moment for me, and I grieved for a long time. And I thought my dad would respect my mom and forget about the adoption. However, 2 weeks after she got buried, he brought home a girl whom I was obviously older than. He introduced her as his daughter and urged me to get along with her. Believe me, I tried. I tried so much, but it seemed impossible. Zoe, my adopted sister, was all shades of evil. On the first day, she'd noticed the tension between myself and my dad and had easily caught on what was going on. She tortured me without pity and was having so much fun doing it. One day, with 3 of us in the living room, I brought a case up to my father. I needed to pay my tuition fees since I'd just gotten into my 2nd year in college, but my dad refused, claiming he didn't have any money to give me. Right after he barked at me for not having money, Zoe requested money for a change of wigs and shoes. It was twice more than the one I required. "I'll send it to you before night falls, my princess." I felt heartbroken. I stood up and tried to leave, but Zoe stopped me.
You only leave when I asked you to. Sit down.
I turned to my dad, hoping so much that he'd say something, but he never did. "Do what the girl says. She rules this house." I slowly lowered back to the couch, my mind scattered around different thoughts. Zoe continued that way. She was truly in control. She stopped me from entering the kitchen, restricted me from speaking unless asked. Eventually, she stopped my education, claiming it wasn't where I needed to be. I tried to fight again, but my father stood against me, and I ended up bending to their wishes. I stopped school and was made to stay home every day. Meanwhile, Zoe didn't miss class for a day. I was made to stay home and cook and clean and suffer, while she had everything she wanted served on a golden platter by my father. At 20, Zoe concluded that I wasn't meant to be in the house anymore. Of course, my dad agreed.
You don't need him since you have me, Daddy. Cut him off and let him leave.
My father did whatever his princess wanted. He kicked me out of his house without anything, not even clothes, because he got them for me. A good Samaritan, who's become my best friend now, helped me that night. He lent me his clothes and even allowed me stay in his house. He helped me get a job as a nurse after I got my nursing certificate a few years of moving in with him, and after 4 months of working, I got a small apartment. I hated Zoe and my father, so I never thought about them. One day, 3 years later, I ran into Zoe at my workplace. I pretended to have forgotten everything while she spoke to me. I got to know that my father had suffered from leukemia. They spent so much trying to cure him, all to no avail. They sold properties and took him to different hospitals, but no treatment seemed to work. Eventually, he died. The few properties he left behind got confiscated by the banks which he'd taken loans from without his beloved princess's knowledge. Anyway, she was broke, homeless, and desperately needed a job. I beamed within me. My father had received his punishment by suffering so much before dying, and the universe had brought Zoe for her share. I assured her that she was going to get the nursing job at our hospital, and she believed me. The people who'd be doing the interview were all my closest friends, and I'd opened up about what Zoe and my father had done. I asked them to give Zoe a huge humiliation while I prepared the final one. Of course, they agreed. I snuck into the office where everyone had kept their bags. The owner of the office was our boss, and he was very careless. I was sure I'd find something valuable lying around, and I did. About 8 bundles of dollar notes and a wristwatch that screamed it was expensive. Locating Zoe's bags, I dropped the items in there and zipped it close. Luck was on my side, as he had no CCTV camera in his office. The man was scared of it, so all cameras around him was taken away. That meant there'd be no evidence of me putting it in there. I left immediately. After a few minutes, Zoe rushed out of the boardroom. I could tell she was in tears. My colleague sent me a video he made of her being humiliated, and I couldn't help my laughter. Her documents were faked, and she couldn't even reply to simple questions about drugs. Everyone had laughed at her and called her several vile names, which made her run out. From the reception area where I sat, I heard my boss's loud voice ordering someone to stop. When I looked, it was Zoe. He asked if she'd seen his money and wristwatch, but she replied that she hadn't. My boss said she was the only one who'd left his office, but she maintained that she didn't steal. I passed my phone to the receptionist and asked her to start recording, which she happily did. I walked over to them. By now, most workers were watching them, alongside the other candidates and interviewers. "Excuse me, sir. I know her. She used to be my adopted sister before she sent me out of my father's house. She used to steal a lot, but I believe she stopped it now. Right, Zoe?" She looked at me with pure confusion in her eyes. Anyway, I turned to my boss, still playing my game. "Look how shocked she is. She wouldn't steal anything. I'm sure of that. If you don't believe, you can just search her to be sure." "I'm gonna do just that." He grabbed Zoe's bag from her and emptied its contents on the floor, the money and wristwatch falling out with everything else. I let out a dramatic gasp. "I'm so ashamed of you, Zoe. You've embarrassed me." My boss wasn't having it. While he was yelling at her, one of my colleagues who'd interviewed her butt in and told my boss that Zoe was also a quack trying to squeeze her way in and endanger the patients. He showed the video to him, and my boss was livid. He immediately contacted one of his police friends, and Zoe dropped to her knees, begging me to talk to my boss and begging the man to forgive her. I enjoyed seeing her that way. The police soon arrived, and she was immediately arrested. My boss pressed charges against her for stealing and lying. The state also found her guilty for carrying a fake nursing certificate around. Altogether, they earned her 8 years in jail. I posted the video of her, which the receptionist had recorded. Most workers did the same, and soon, she was everywhere on the internet. I visited her in jail to show her what she was getting popular for, and she nearly broke down the glass separating us in anger. Well, before leaving, I managed to spread news around the prison that she was a liar and a thief, and everyone should avoid her. I couldn't wait to go there again and see her looking all defeated. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.